On December the 22nd, Sun Liren, commander of the 38th Division and vice commander of the 1st Army, arrived on the front line at Yupanga. There he set up his command centre in a thicket 500 metres from the enemy front line. When the troops in the Lee family stockade received this news, they were overjoyed. The main force had not abandoned them. Their many weeks of combat had been worth it, and their position was now secure. While bitter fighting was going on at the front lines, the remaining forces set off from Lido, crossed the precipitous Naga Hills, and arrived at Xinguiyang. The First Army's troop movement capability had improved considerably, and another powerful division, the 22nd Division, was also on the move and would soon join the battle.
Set down on Chinese soil, thousands of tons.
It was early spring 1943. An advanced detachment composed of officers was taken by plane over the hump to a training base in India. Later, they were enrolled in the new First Army and stationed in India. Among them was Huang Renyu, who was to become a famous historian. In the following 1.5 years, he fought in several battles to retake Burma, and he wrote many reports about the fighting for the newspaper Dagung Bao. For one of the reports, he was paid as much as 300 rupees, equivalent to 5 months' allowance of an American captain. At the end of 1943, Chinese troops mounted counterattacks in northern Burma. The victory over the Japanese army in Yupanga much boosted the morale of the Chinese army in India and deflated the morale of the Japanese army. The joint force of the Japanese 55th and 56th detachments retreated to Kra Taifaga in a flatland area in the Hukong Valley. There, they built positions on the hills and jungles, ready to fight back at the Indian Army when it spread its troops for attack. The Chinese new First Army threw all its force into the battle. The 113th Regiment and the 114th Regiment under Sun Liren attacked from the two flanks of the Japanese position to cut apart the 55th Detachment and the 56th Detachment of the Japanese Army. The 112th Regiment of the new 38th Division cut off the retreat of the Japanese troops. The 22nd Regiment of the new 22nd Division under the command of Liao Yaoxiang wiped out the Japanese troops left behind by the Japanese who had gone to support those fighting in Kra Taifaga. Within less than half a month, the new First Army swept all before it, taking Japanese peripheral positions and cutting off their retreat. At dawn on January the 18th, American planes took off from Shibuya to bombard the Japanese in Kra Taifaga. American tanks shelled the enemy. These joint attacks cleaned the dead angles of the Japanese positions. "13 days later, a group of tanks charged into the command post of the Japanese 18th Division and rolled over the bodies of the division's chief of staff and several dozen other Japanese officers. On the same day, the new 38th Division launched a general attack on Kra Taifaga. 36 planes of the American 10th Air Fleet attacked from the air by turn. The Japanese gave up the defense of Kra Taifaga and the siege was broken. The new 38th Army took over Kra Taifaga, declaring another victory of the Chinese Army in India.
这5个师的战斗力，你想看放在一起，是绝对不能轻视的。再加上全部美式装备的换装，和强大的缅北反攻作战中美军强大的空中火力支援和炮兵的地面的炮兵火力支援， 那么他们的战斗力在缅北反攻作战中有那样一种表现，让我们的对手日军都感到脱胎换骨那样的表现，也就不奇怪了。
The Battle of Kra Taifagha was of landmark significance in the counterattacks in northern Burma. After that battle, the Chinese army secured its foothold within Burma, forcing the Japanese army into a totally passive position. Before this battle, in 1942, construction of a highway linking China with India began ahead of schedule. The China-India Road started in Lido in India to run through the jungles in northern Burma under Japanese control, joined the Yunnan-Burma Road, and ran further into China. It was an artery through which China obtained military supplies from other countries.
中印公路啊，可以说是非常非常这个艰苦的一段的历史啊，经历过那里的人都知道，那个地方简直不是人可以经过的地方啊，瘴气呀非常的重啊，而且都有毒啊，在空气都有毒。
As well as the harsh natural environment of the jungles in northern Burma, there was another problem. In Burma, most of the highways, railways and bridges ran from south to north, but the China-India Road had to run from east to west. It was the rainy season in northern Burma, and the wet weather made road construction even more difficult. Many engineers simply could not believe that the project would be completed on time.
那雨季一下就是半年，雨季也是半年了啊。那个地方修得很困难的，早上刚修完的路，下雨季一来下大雨又垮掉了，垮掉了又修啊，这样前面打仗后面修路，这个是很艰苦的。
Construction of the road proceeded very slowly, but the builders were requested to keep up with the fighting troops so that materials could be delivered to the front. Advanced American machinery played a great role in the work.
美军筑路机械化部队，那时候的推土机啊，那个8个字啊，那都是有。那是到现在我们才看到推土机，所以作战胜利那就是靠工业化，没有现在工业化，这就所以我对美军的印象很深刻。
And all China knew what that would mean.
On December the 27th, 1943, the section of the China-India Road from Lido to Shebuiyang opened to traffic. 6 days later, the Allies moved their headquarters of the Northern Burma Command to Shebuiyang, and there they built a small airport next to the road. The planes took intelligence agents to the front line and wounded soldiers back. The wounded soldiers were sent to the army hospital directly from the airport. In the Burmese language, Hukong Valley in northern Burma means place of demons. The high mountains were covered with dense forests and the desolate valley was crisscrossed with numerous rivers. The Chinese Expeditionary Force in India was not unfamiliar with the Hukong River Valley. In its retreat in the rainy season in 1942, the Fifth Army had entered this forbidden area by chance. The soldiers lost their direction and ran out of food. Many of them died. Some veterans of the Fifth Army of the Chinese Expeditionary Force still remember the skeletons of the dead soldiers of the Fifth Army. After repeated defeats, the Japanese 18th Division changed its defense strategy. They divided their force into the 55th Detachment and the 56th Detachment to take over Mein Quan and Malor Bum in the heartland of the Hukong Valley. The commander of the 18th Division set his headquarters in Mein Quan. The Japanese wanted to stake all on one cast of the dice.
胡康河谷日军最主要的支撑点孟关，孟关。那么当时日军第18师团田中新一的第18师团，也是这个缅甸战场的老对手了，集中了重兵屯重兵防守孟关。那么当时日军的兵力，在缅甸的兵力已经从刚整个入缅作战时候的一个军4个师团不到10万人，这个时候已经扩编为整个一个缅甸方面军3个军，那么将近30万人。而在孟关这一线、瓦鲁班这一线，当时日军一共18师团囤积了7个步兵营，它的叫步兵大队了，7个步兵营，2个山炮营，1个重炮营150的重炮营，还有1个战防炮营、反坦克炮营。那么7个步兵营、4个步兵营集中防守这一线，兵力配备是相当强的。
The Chinese army in India had a smaller force. Its frontline troops belonged to the new 38th Division under the command of Sun Liren and the new 22nd Division under the command of Liao Yaoxiang. This joint force of the 2 Chinese divisions was not much larger than the 1 division of the Japanese army, but the 2 Chinese divisions were well trained and equipped, and the maps they had studied carefully at Ramgarh base proved to be very useful in their fighting in the jungle. Seen from the air, most of the Hukong Valley in northern Burma was covered with high and flourishing trees. Only a few open spots could be seen in the forests. One of them was Mein Quan. American reconnaissance planes photographed the entire valley and patched the photos together. This map was then enlarged constantly until it showed almost all the territory of Burma.
空中照相地图这个我们过去打仗都有，打仗都有地图地图。中国的地图呢，比例尺又太小打仗都要用大比例尺的地图有一个村庄、一个公路交叉点都能看得出来的地方，那才有用。
Aerial maps are vital for airdropping supplies. Before the China-India road was completed, the frontline troops mainly depended on American planes for their supplies. The planes airdropped the supplies according to marks on the map. The Chinese army in India wrote in its summary report after the war, "No matter where we were, even besieged by the enemy, we were never worried about our supplies because we could always get them from the air. With ample supplies from the rear, the troops at the front line fought to their full capacity."
就是飞机把这个弹药给养全部都这个降落伞降下来，一个盒子，这个里面外头都是拉的防止这个给水侵蚀了。里头是什么呢？一大块巧克力那个巧克力这个热量很大的，那么有这个糯米的罐头，有压缩饼干，还有香烟。没有这个作战的时候他们就有那个叫做10 in 1，是10个人吃一大箱的一个给养，那里面什么都有什么火鸡肉什么香肠什么东西，还有好多，这个一大箱子10个人吃都吃不了。那么此外有各种各样的饮料、啤酒，什么都有。
In an article, Huang Renyu wrote about the logistics support provided by the American Army to the Chinese fighting troops. We have liaison that is better than that of the enemy. Our supply is also better than the enemy. In the beginning, we were at a disadvantage, but now the table has been turned. Afterwards, the enemy will have the bitter taste of backwardness.
The Chinese forces advanced from the north.
As the fighting began, the new 38th Division got the upper hand. They intercepted Japanese troops on the southern bank of the Ta-9 River. But the new 22nd Division was not so lucky. Sun Li-ren, its commander, sent his 113th Regiment to attack the Japanese in Mainquan in order to rescue the besieged new 22nd Division.
这个仗打得非常漂亮，可能也是这种战术以及在这种战术背后所支撑的强大的火力和中国军队的战斗力出乎日军的意料。那么孙立人的前面的新编第22师在正面进攻的时候，调了一个步兵营与战车第1营组成一支联合特遣部队，搞了一个小的迂回穿插，从右翼搞了一个小的迂回穿插，直接插到了孟关日军第18师团的司令部。当时这个打进去的时候，日军确实出乎意料，正面强攻就已经感到雷霆万钧之势了，已经有点招架不住了。后边侧翼咵嚓插过来一支部队，而且还是一支战车营，步坦协同的联合的突击部队。那么这种坦克、战车这种突击，不仅是日军当时所没有想到的，甚至也是日军当时所无法比拟。
The Japanese division commander felt that all hope was lost, and so he decided to leave a small force to defend Mainquan and concentrate his main force on the attack on Ma Luang Bum. But then the unthinkable happened.
Parachute detachments lead the way, just as in Holland, in Belgium, in Norway.
Tall and strong American soldiers came down from the air. They belonged to the well-equipped 5307 Infantry Regiment, which specialized in jungle fighting. The Americans marched to the south of Mainquan, chewing gum, cigarettes dangling from their lips. The new 22nd Division and the Tank Battalion marched along a road littered with corpses of Japanese soldiers in pursuit of the main force of the Japanese 18th Division fleeing to Mainquan. If the Japanese wanted to escape, they had to beat a crack unit of the American garrison in Mainquan. These American soldiers had fought victoriously in the hilly jungles in the Solomon Islands, but in Burma they stumbled into mire. When they were fighting in the Pacific, their positions had been built for them by army engineers using machinery. They even drank Coca-Cola in the trenches. But now they had to build the positions themselves. They assumed that the Japanese had lost their morale for the fight, but they were wrong. These American crack troops proved themselves not as great as their reputation indicated.
美军那支唯一参战的作战部队，也就是他们很多西方的这个媒体渲染叫打劫者那支部队，听起来很凶的那支部队啊，他们在我们新38师的外侧，换言之，在我们的掩护之下，准备再搞一次像瓦鲁班的穿插，准备参一下战，想捡个便宜。没想到这个日军给他们出了点情况，走到半道上，突然向我们报警说被日军包围。
The Japanese in Wa Loa Bum divided their force into the 55th Detachment and the 56th Detachment to break the encirclement. The two columns of the Japanese army fought desperately for their lives. Before dawn, the commander of the 56th Detachment learned that the Japanese 2nd Brigade had launched an offensive against the American defenders of the ferry. The Japanese commander was determined to die together with the enemy. To his surprise, his soldiers had no difficulty at all beating this crack unit of the American army. Many of the Americans were killed, and the luckier ones fled from their position.
孙毅人调了一个团过去增援，很快解围。解围之后发现一看，日军多少兵力？把美军的一个团，美军一个团呐，3000多人呐，号称是打劫者呀。日军多少兵力？2个中队，2个步兵连，就把他们给阻击住，并且围困起来了。当然，这种情况也只有在丛林战中才能发现。大家知道，丛林战很难对敌情做出准确判断，尤其是那些心虚的部队和缺乏经验的部队这也是非常可笑的一次，给我们出了点情况。还好没有影响大局没有影响大局。救出来之后，他马上就撤回去了，我们就继续打仗就是了。
过去我们那个孙立人师长就讲，原先的打孟关是很难打的。孙立人有一句话，他的胡子留得很长，人家问他你为什么不刮胡子啊？他说不破孟关不剃须，不孟关我不剃胡子。就是打下孟关以后，他才剃了胡须。
At noon on March the 8th, the 113th Regiment and 1st Tank Battalion of the new 38th Division and an American commando unit launched the general offensive against the Japanese in Walor Boom. Around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the 1st Tank Battalion charged through a gap in the river dike. The Japanese had never expected the Chinese tanks to make it over the river. The gunfire from the tanks turned the Japanese position into a sea of fire. The Japanese were forced to retreat. At 1:30 in the afternoon, the 1st Tank Battalion rolled up the shore of the river. The jubilant tankmen pushed forward the throttle and charged ahead. They took over the headquarters of the Japanese 18th Division and there captured all the documents, the car of the division commander and his official seal. All the Japanese troops aside from the division commander were killed.
我那时候我也是作为坦克营的联络官，我也跟着坦克营一块儿，也驾着坦克一起，就迂回到马鲁班去了。这个时候就消灭了日本18师团司令部，日本师团长叫田中信一中将逃跑了，打死2个上下，那他叫大佐还有一个中佐把他的司令部也消灭了，缴获了他的司令部的官方大印，就18师团司令部的官方大印。
田中信一还算跑得快，仅以身免所有的一切大概除了指挥刀随身带走了，其他的基本上都扔在那儿了包括他第18师团的官方大印，所有的作战文书，包括他本人的坐车，甚至包括他应该说作为师团的这个指挥官应该寸步不离的师团司令部的作战科长。
The battle left a deep impression on Huang Renyu. Later he wrote, "The following day after the fighting in the Mainquan River Valley, I saw a corpse of a Japanese soldier and realized that he and I shared many similarities. We were around the same age and had a similar educational background. He had been reviewing his English lessons the previous day. He must have been a university student." On this refreshing morning in April, butterflies are dancing in the air, grasshoppers are jumping around. The air is permeated with the pleasant aroma of wild flowers. A bilingual dictionary lies on top of a bush. Water is dripping from it. In the Battle of Mainquan Walor Boom, the Allies' joint force annihilated more than 1,500 men over the Japanese 18th Division and drove the Japanese out of the Hukong Valley. The battle laid a solid foundation for the victory in the offensive campaign in northern Burma.
新38师、新22师前后夹击，我们所谓的孟关瓦鲁班之战 完胜大捷啊，也叫孟关大捷啊。那么由此也就基本结束了反攻缅北第一仗胡康河谷战役。那么综合前面的一系列小规模作战的战果，整个胡康河谷战役反击战役，我新一军2个主力师，新38师、新22师加新30师的一个加强团，一共歼灭日军第18师团主力12000余人，我军伤亡6000余人，敌我伤亡对比达到了2比1啊！我想这是在中日军队，我们不是没有大规模的成建制歼灭过日军，但是这种敌我伤亡对比，恐怕在整个中日两军的作战历史上是不多见的。歼敌12000，自己伤亡6000多人啊！那么当然，大家必须考虑到，这还是在我们被迫进入野人山这种易守难攻的、不便于大兵团作战的地形之下，被迫进入这种绝地作战过程中所取得战果。